right, welcome back everybody. This is going to be a fun video here. This is an advanced course, I will remind you guys. And so in this video, we're going to write some advanced code. We're going to deal in this video with alerts. So two alerts. One, we have the confirmation dialog, which we'll talk about towards the end of the video. But I also want to display an alert on this screen if the user types something that is something that maybe we can't send to the AI. So if maybe it's only one character long, we want to add a little bit of text validation on here so that if they click the send and there is nothing, rather than sending a blank string, we show a little alert that says, please add more characters. So for starters, let's get some text validation going. So we have our text field text, but before we actually go and make a chat message, let's make sure that this content is actually good and valid. Let's create a private func here and let's call this check if text is valid, and let's return a Boolean from this. All right, so if the text is valid, this will be true. If not, this will be false. So let's pass in the text. We're going to pass in the content, or let's call it the text of type string. Let's call it from our code here. We'll say let is valid equals check if text is valid. We'll pass in the content. So with this, we should be able to write if is valid, else. So if it is valid, let's go ahead and do the rest of this. Else, let's show an error. So let's check if the text is valid. Let's have some basic requirements here. Let's say let minimum character count equals 3. So let's say here, let's do a guard statement. We'll say guard the text dot count is greater than or equal to 3. We're making sure that it's greater than or equal to 3. Else, let's go ahead and return false. And if it's true, let's return true. All right, so in our code, we should now be able to type something and then send it. But if we only have one character, it doesn't actually send. So if it doesn't send, let's show an error to the user. So in our show an error section here, let's set up our alert at the top. So just like we have a confirmation dialog, we're going to have a .alert. And we'll look for the one with the is presented and actions. So is presented and actions. I think we can use either of these. Let's do the one with the message here as well. So click that, option, enter. The title here, I think this is the title for the alert. Let's go ahead and put title. Let's bind to a Boolean. So let's do up here, let's create another at state private var. Let's call this show alert of type bool, set it equal to false. So let's go ahead and bind to that $ show alert. Let's put some actions in here. Let's add in a button and we'll look for the title key. We'll say okay, and there's no action. And then for the message, let's just put text that says message. I'm not exactly sure where the message appears, so I'll just put this as placeholder for now. Down at the bottom, let's go ahead and say show alert equals true. If I click something, all right, title and message. Let's change our title to say, please add maybe at least 3 characters. And then the message, we don't need a message. Maybe let's just delete that. We'll leave it a blank string for now. So if I click this, please add at least 3 characters. Okay, cool. All right, let me add 2 characters and still an error. Let me add 3 characters and then it should send. Great. We're getting there. Now, obviously this is not reusable and that's going to be a main theme for the rest of this video. But let's go down here and actually start pretending like maybe we need to change the text of that alert. So another really common text validation that most chat apps have is some sort of profanity filter. So maybe we also have like a profanity word array. So there are third-party services and APIs that can go and do the profanity check on your text. But I think for an MVP, that's probably overkill. And we can get away with just writing some simple profanity check in our code ourselves. We're just going to do an example here. We're not going to write out all of the bad words, but let's go ahead and just pretend like we had an array of all of the bad words that we don't want people to send in our app. Let's say let bad words, which will be an array of string. We'll set it equal to an array of bad words. Let's try to keep it PG-18. So I'm not going to do that bad words, but let's just go ahead and say shit and maybe bitch and let's do one more. We'll just call this ass. Bad words. Obviously, there's a ton more, but let's also check against our array of bad words to see if the user is saying something really vulgar, we don't want to allow that in our app. Let's say if bad words contains the text.lowercase, let's lowercase it so we can just check against the lowercase words. Then let's go ahead and return false as well. All right, so now I'll type in hello and it should work. I'll type in shit and it should not work. All right. So now the problem we're getting is that the error message is not correct with our check if text is valid. So let's go ahead and fix that. Rather than just returning true or false from here, let's throw an error from this function so that we can get the specific error back when we go and make an alert. So I'm going to change this to be throws. So this way, if it throws an error, we'll assume that the text is not valid. Let's create an error now. We'll say, let's do an enum, and we'll say text validation error. Let's make it of type localized error. And the first case is going to be not enough characters. And the second case is going to be has bad words. So here, let's go ahead and throw text validation error, not enough characters. And here we'll throw text validation error, has bad words. So in our code down here, rather than an if else, let's go ahead and make this try. And then we'll do a do catch. We'll do, and then we'll catch. So if there is an error, we'll handle that here. So we'll put show alert as true, and we'll move all this code into our success section here. I'll delete this from the bottom. This is not returning a Boolean anymore, so we can just delete that. We can also delete this. So we can assume that if this function finishes, if it completes getting to down here, this is a success. So as long as it doesn't throw an error, we're good. But if it throws an error, we want to then go put the error on the screen. So let's first make sure that this works. If I type in shit, it should throw an error. Cool. Now we want to put the error message. So we're going to catch the error here. And we want to put this error on the screen. So rather than showing just an alert as a Boolean, let's make another state and we'll say, let's call this the alert message of type string. Set it equal to a blank string to start. Or actually, let's call it the alert title. And then we'll put the alert title as the title here. So now coming down in our code, this should be let error, catch let error. So now we're first going to say the alert title is equal to the error.localized description. Let's try that out. Let's type in shit, and we got the error. That obviously is not very descriptive. Let's go ahead to our error and add in a error description, custom description. We'll switch on self, and for the not enough characters, let's return, please add at least 3 characters. For has bad words, let's go ahead and return. Let's just be explicit here. We'll say bad word detected. Please rephrase your message. All right, let's come down here and let's try it again. Let's say shit, and then it should say bad word detected. Please rephrase your message. Great. Let's try the other message here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to say not enough characters. So A, please add at least 3 characters. Great. What happens if we want to change our minimum character count to 4? Let's add the word A, let's click send, and now it still says 3. So that we have a potential bug in our app if we go and we change some logic later on for the actual minimum character count. So inside this error here, inside this alert, let's also pass in the min, which is the minimum. Let's make it an integer. And then when we switch on this, we'll say not enough characters, and we can get the minimum. Let's put the minimum here. So now I can take the minimum character count and I'll pass it in to this edge case. And sorry, this is actually a bug. This should be the minimum character count. All right, so now if I have 3, it should still be an error. And it says, please add at least 4 characters. So we got our text validation working. Let's go ahead and move it to another file, just this validation part, because Let's, for example, maybe we make another screen, another chat screen, or if anywhere else in our app we wanted to reuse this text validation, it shouldn't be tightly coupled to the chat screen. We should be able to put any text through text validation at any time. So I'm going to cut it, and let's go to I think we already have a utilities folder. Let's go down to our utilities folder, which is down here. Let's create a new file, a new empty file, and we'll call this text validation helper. And let's paste in our code. I'm going to create in here just a quick struct and call it text validation helper. And then I'm going to put the text validation inside. And I think we can also put the error inside the struct as well. Let's import foundation at the top. And I actually don't need an instance or even to create the struct. I'm actually just putting this code in here just so that it's easily accessible. So let's, instead of making this private, let's make this static. So I can call text field helper dot check if text is valid. Let's go back to our chats view. Let's call text field helper dot check if text is valid, just to put it in another file. And now we're going to work on actually making this modifier reusable. All right, so firstly, and I've actually covered this on my YouTube channel already. I did a whole video on custom errors and alerts in SwiftUI. I will link that video below. It's a great video to watch if you really want to deep dive on how to do this. But because I've posted it there, I'm going to move a little bit quicker in this video. So I don't like the fact that we have two different states to show the alert. We have the Boolean and we have the title. You could imagine that maybe I set the title, but I forget to set the Boolean. Or vice versa, we set the Boolean and we forgot to set the title. So for example, maybe this was actually a optional. And then down here we can do the alert title, otherwise blank string. Now obviously this should never happen, but you could imagine that if I go and for some reason I forget to call this line of code, but I still call this line of code, now we're going to have an alert on the screen that is clearly a bad user experience. So what I want to do is actually couple both of these together. And I want to display the alert solely based on this value. So if this is not nil, then I display the alert. So this is a Boolean right here. And right now we're binding down here to the Boolean. But really I want to create a custom binding so that I can bind to this value not being nil. So in here, let's create a custom binding with a getter and a setter. I'll click enter on the getter and I'll click enter on the setter. This will be the new value that we get back. And in here, we're going to say it's true if the alert title is not equal to nil. And then for the setter, we'll just say if not new value, let's set the alert title back equal to nil. So if we're setting it back to false, so meaning the alert is being dismissed, then we'll set the alert title back to nil as well. So now I should be able to hide, not use this show alert, and I should be able to just set the alert title in the code. Let's go ahead and test it. I'm going to put one letter in here, and then just like that, the error is actually still appearing even without that Boolean. Cool. First section done. Now, I don't like this code. This code looks really confusing. I think I've seen junior developers, even myself, get confused when I see this. So let's make this reusable. Up here at the top outside of the chat view, let's create an extension of binding, and we'll open the brackets. Now, we know this binding is going to be of type bool, right? If I hold the option button and click on is presented, we can see that it's a binding of type bool. That is the value of this binding. So this will be an extension of binding where the value is equal to a bool. And we're going to create a new initializer here. From this initializer, we're going to call the default initializer. So we'll say, so just like down here, we're actually just creating the regular binding. I'll copy this and move it up here. So I'm basically going to do exactly this, but inside here. So let's pass in the alert title of type optional string. And let's call self.init and get the regular getter and setter. So the getter here will be if the alert title is not equal to nil. The setter, this will be the new value, and we'll say if not new value, let's go ahead and set the alert title equal to nil. We can delete this. Now I can't set it because we're just passing in a string, but we want to pass in a binding to the string. So we'll make this a binding of type optional string. And let's access not the binding, but the wrapped value inside. So we'll go .wrapped value here. This will also be alert title.wrapped value is not equal to nil. Lastly, this is a reusable binding. So I don't want it to be coupled to the string or to the alert. I want it to be just coupled to anything being optional. I could reuse it for an optional integer, an optional double, an optional anything else avatar model. I want to be able to just reuse it across the board. So let's change this to type T for a generic type. And we'll go ahead here and define what T is. Once I do this, Swift 6 is going to give us errors that the type T is not sendable. So let's actually declare that T is anything that conforms to the sendable protocol. Lastly, right now this is going to read binding alert title. And I want it to actually be binding if not nil. And then I can bind to something. So let's change this to if not nil. And we'll call this value inside the function. So we'll say the value here. Let's delete our code here. And let's go and try to use it. So now, instead of having to do this every time and on each screen, I'm going to do a binding. And we'll say if not nil, the alert title. Let's check it out, see if it works. And it looks like it works. Now this is a little bit more reusable already. Let's go to the next step now. What if I want to customize not only the alert, but also the subtitle that goes in here? So I go like this, subtitle. Well, now we can't just bind to a string. I want to bind to some other type that has two strings, right? The title and the subtitle. Up here, let's make a new struct and let's call this AnyAppAlert. And we will open the brackets. In here, we'll add a title of type string, and we'll also add a subtitle of type optional string. Let's go ahead and make this AnyAppAlert, and we'll come down to our code. So instead of just setting it to the error now, the localized description, we'll set alert. We shouldn't call it alert title anymore. Let's just call this show alert, and this will be the alert that we're calling. So down at the bottom, we'll say show alert equals to AnyAppAlert. And let's go ahead, and now we have the title and the subtitle. The title will be the error.localized description, and now we have the option of just putting some subtitle here. Let's go ahead and delete this, see if it works. Looks like we have, all right, so now we need to change the title on the alert, which is going to be the show alert dot title. And the subtitle will be show alert dot subtitle, otherwise blank string. And actually, I think we don't need to show the alert, the message here, unless we have the alert. So let's do an if let subtitle equals show alert dot subtitle. Let's go ahead and put it on the screen, and we'll put the subtitle in here. Let's bind to the show alert. I guess this should be optional. Let's reload the canvas quick and see if it's working. Type something, click error, and looks like some subtitle here. So now we've made this a little bit more reusable so that we can add both a title and a subtitle into our app alerts. The last piece of this is going to be, what if we actually want to add the buttons in here as well? So we can see here the buttons are not customizable yet, right? So let's come up here and let's also add in our app alert buttons. This will be of type, let's make it a function that returns some view. Now we know from previous videos here that we can't return some view. So we could define some generic type, but in some cases it's actually easier to just pass around any view. Any view is a generic view, so you can option and click on it. It is a type erased view. So it's basically just, you could take any view in SwiftUI and just wrap it as any view, and now it's any view. It's like erasing basically anything from the view other than it being a view, if that makes sense. So we'll just have a function here that returns us any view. Let's try it out. All right, we're getting a couple weird errors here. So AnyAppAlert does not conform to sendable. So we're going to need to make it sendable in order to bind to it. So up here, let's go ahead and make this conform to the sendable protocol. By default, this is just a function that returns view, and the compiler does not know that this is sendable. So let's go ahead and make this at sendable. Let's come down to the bottom and try it out here. So we should also now have a buttons method where I can put a button, and let's put hi, and then maybe let's try to put 2 buttons in here, and let's put another one that says hello and see if it works. We need to return any view from this closure, so let's make this any view. And let's put these buttons in here. And it needs just one view. These are separated into 2 different views. So let's cut these and put them in a group. And then we should be able to now display this. Let's go ahead and try it. Let's type in something, and our buttons are not appearing. That is probably because here we need to show the showAlert.buttons. And buttons is actually a function. If you remember, this is a function that returns any view. So we need to call the function from inside our code. Let's try it. Great, hi and hello. Both of our buttons are working. And now, of course, we don't want to actually add buttons most of the time. We want to just keep that OK button here. So in our AnyAppAlert, let's add a custom initializer. And let's customize our initializer. So subtitle by default is nil. That's correct. Let's put these on multiple lines, Control M. But the buttons array, let's actually make this. Let's get rid of the word escaping. Let's make this, let's put this in parentheses and make it optional and set it equal to nil. And again, I want to mark this as a sendable function. So I'll just put the word sendable here. All right. So now we need buttons even if we send in the nil variable. So if this is nil, we'll do otherwise. Let's go ahead and add a very basic function, I'll open the brackets, with any view. And we'll add in a very simple plain button that says OK. So now I should be able to come down to my code and actually not include buttons if I don't want to. And I can even not include the subtitle. And I can just make this any alert. Let's try it out real quick. And our alert is back to working. As we build our app, we're going to actually do this a lot, where we take an error and just show the error description. And so just as a convenience factor, we're going to add a secondary initializer in here. And we're just going to pass in an error of type error. And we'll call this initializer from here. And let's go ahead and actually pass in the title will just make error. And then the subtitle will be the error.localized description. And the buttons will be nil. We'll use our default OK button. So now I should be able to very quickly in my code, as I start programming and I have a bunch of errors, I just say show alert equals AnyAppAlert from error. And I can delete this. And I never have to worry about actually adding the logic for any errors basically ever again. Error. Please add at least 4 characters. Now that is some cool code. We can actually imply that the error is coming from this catch, so we can delete these words, and the compiler will still know what this error is. And last but not least, the final piece of this is I do not like writing this code on every view. So if I wanted to do this on another view, I would have to copy it and have to paste it on every single view that I do this alert on. Let's instead create an extension of view, and we'll create a function that says show custom alert, and we'll call self dot, and we'll paste in our code here. We're going to pass in the alert, which will be of type AnyAppAlert, and I will make it optional. And we know that this is going to be binding, so binding AnyAppAlert. So now we need to update our function here. Because this is binding already, we need this to actually be the alert.wrapped value. So we're going to look at the value, the alert inside this binding. Alert.wrapped value, I will copy, I'll paste it here, I'll paste it here, and I'll paste. And then up here, let's just bind to the alert. This is a binding, so I actually don't need the $sign here. I could just pass in alert. Let's go ahead and return some view from this. Let's make sure it's working. So coming down to my code here, I will delete all this, and let's just say show custom alert and bind to the show alert. Make sure it works. Cool. Last but not least, I want to do the exact same thing for the confirmation dialog. Confirmation dialog is the other alert that we have. So this screen that pops up here, but the logic and even the modifier here is almost the exact same, right? So let's come up here and let's create a quick little maybe enum we'll call alert type. And we'll have both the alert as well as the confirmation dialog. Let's pass in the alert type in here. So we'll say type of type alert type. We'll give the default as .alert because that's the more common. And then in here, let's go ahead and switch on the type. So if it is alert, this is what we're going to return. And if it is confirmation dialog, let's do self. Let's come down here. Let's take our confirmation dialog code, paste it on here. And so it's going to be almost the same. So now we have this alert we'll put as the title. We'll do a binding, the same binding. The buttons will be the same buttons. And then the text, we'll do this if let here as well. We're getting a quick final error from the compiler that basically this view is different from this view. So let's go ahead and make sure the compiler knows that this is a view builder function. So the result from this function could be different depending on the situation. Let's come down here and also do a .show alert. And this time we're going to make a .confirmation dial. Let's go ahead and update our show chat settings. Show chat settings here. I'm going to make show chat settings of type AnyAppAlert, and it will be nil to start as well. And then I'm just going to cut this code. Let's come down to where we set up our show chat settings. And then down here, let's say show chat settings equals to AnyAppAlert, option enter, triple click, control M. The title, I think we made just a blank string. The subtitle, we had what would you like to do? And then for our buttons, let's add an any view. Let's add in a group like we saw before. And then let's put our buttons inside that group. Let's delete this down here. Delete this code up here. And sorry, this is not just any view, it is a function that has returns any view. And there we go. So let's go and click on chat settings pressed. And it still works. Look at that. Now we have this totally reusable screen here. And next time I make an alert in our app, we're just going to create show alert of type any alert. And we're just going to bind to show alert. And then we're done. And we don't have to worry about all those modifiers and all that logic ever again. And now on command, we can change our custom alerts basically however we want with one line of code, which is awesome. This, I think, is actually advanced programming in SwiftUI. Once you get in the hang of building modifiers like this, you start to realize that SwiftUI can get really powerful. It really can, because there's so much logic that's happening. And this is so reusable. I can just copy this and put it on any screen. It literally takes me 2 seconds to copy this and to copy this and to put it on another screen. Let's go ahead and just move some of this code into other files before we end the video. So in our components section, I will create a new folder and call this alerts. In here, let's go ahead and let's cut our AnyAppAlert. And I'm just going to paste it in this folder. So we create a file here. Let's import SwiftUI and import Foundation. Let's also put the alert type and the show custom alert inside that same file. Even though the show custom alert is actually a view modifier, I think it makes more sense to just keep it in the same file as AnyAppAlert. And then lastly, let's take our binding. Let's look for our extensions file. Let's right click, create a new file and call it binding plus ext. Let's go ahead and cut our binding. Paste it in here. Let's import SwiftUI and import Foundation. Let's build and run Command R just to make sure it compiles. And let's option Command C. Let's call this feature and we'll say AnyAppAlert. Stage it, commit it. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. We wrote some really cool, really tough code here. And let's push it up to GitHub and I will see you in the next video.